Hi, this is Jamie with Legends Health, Wellness, and Performance podcast, and today's guest is Wendy Thueson. She is a owner of Raw Chef Wendy, and she's a certified chef and master herbalist, raw food coach, and energy practitioner. And she's passionate about the healing power of plants and sharing her message of hope and changing life experiences with foods and herbs medicinally.
Yeah.
Wendy, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah. How did you get into this field?
It really was out of desperation. I got really sick. I originally was a cake decorator for over 30 years. I started when I was 12. And who doesn't like sugar and cake?
Yes. Yeah.
But I love doing that because it was a way for me to be able to express myself artistically, and eventually moved on to culinary school and enjoyed that. But when I turned 39, I started getting really sick. In fact, a little bit before that, for 4 years, I was infertile. And I actually went to the doctor and had him check from my head down, and he found a nodule on my thyroid and found out that I had Graves' disease. And so he took that part of the lobe out and put me on medication for the rest of my life. And it helped a little bit. I started getting a little bit more energy, but over time, because I was eating the standard American diet, I was still getting the same results, right? So the raw food happened actually one day in April of 2009 when I was on the couch just pleading to God to take my life. I could not live in this body anymore. I was in so much pain and couldn't take care of myself or my family or anything.
Did you have little kids at home?
I ended up having 4 children after I had my thyroid removed, yes. And they were still quite little at this time. So I was done.
Yeah.
But the answer that I received was that it wasn't my time yet, that I needed to go to the computer and look up nutrition. So I started searching and I found raw food. And that's fresh, uncooked fruits, vegetables, sprouted nuts and seeds, and some sea vegetables like dulse and seaweed, things like that. And when I started eating that, within 2 days, I had energy I'd never known. And within a week, all of my symptoms were gone. It was profound. And what I've learned since then is that when we flood our bodies with nutrition, then it knows exactly what to do to help repair and heal itself. So
now the food industry has taken a lot of, with our processed food, artificial colors, they have removed a lot of the nutritional content with our food. And a lot of times I feel like the majority of Americans are eating and they think that they're eating healthy and they're not. Can you speak about that?
Well, our food supply is very tainted now. You know, we have a lot of pesticides and herbicides and chemicals. And then in the animal products, we have hormones and antibiotics and all of these things that are harming our bodies. Not to mention the genetically modified foods. It's really hard to get a good, clean, pure food anymore unless you grow it yourself. So, if you go organic, that's also non-GMO. But if it's non-GMO, it's not necessarily organic. So there are different things that you need to look for as well.
And how did you have a mentor that helped teach you that, or was that just all online research of your own?
I've been researching for the last almost 10 years now about health and nutrition, and it's been frustrating because out there's a lot of information and it's all very conflicting. So I've had to search for the thread of truth, and really it's been a spiritual experience for me as well, just praying a lot, asking for guidance, and being led to different places for me to understand. And what my big question is how are we as humans created to eat? I don't care about any of the fad diets out there, what the latest thing is. I just wanted to know, how are we created to eat? And when I found the answers to that, then I was like, okay, this makes sense. And when I applied it, then it totally worked.
But I would assume in your research that you had to study autoimmune protocol, the keto diet, the paleo diet, because there is a lot of conflicting information out there. Right. And do you believe that there's one diet that fits all approach?
I do. I really do. And a lot of people disagree with me, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But what I do with my clients is a high amount of raw food and plant-based as much as possible. They can have a little bit of animal products if they want to, but they'll receive the best results. And I've seen people absolutely reverse the diseases and just get back to incredible health by doing these very simple things.
There's a transition, or there's kind of a transformation in mentally in preparing and getting ready and emotionally preparing your food. How was your experience with that, with the transition? Because you came from a French culinary cooking background that uses a lot of dairy and a lot of inflammatory. Most of their thickeners are from flour.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It was a whole new world, and it took me some time to really research and understand. It was like going back to school, really, and I had to unlearn everything that I had learned. And I also had to get rid of all of the cake decorating and things like that, which I mourned it. It was like a death in my life, you know.
Well, that was creative.
Do you
feel like your creativity?
Yeah, and I had to find something else. So I learned to be more creative with plants, you know. But what was your original question? I apologize.
The emotion,
yes,
the transformation of what ends up happening when you change your diet, because you find out there's a lot of things that you thought were truth that are that were not.
So the emotion was really interesting because most of us are emotional eaters. So we stuff a lot of those emotions down with food. And that's what I work with my clients, is how to help them overcome the emotion as well as the addiction to food. And what I found is that these things, these behaviors are really more due to a greater core issue going on. So it could be from abuse or trauma or other things that they're dealing with. And so I've learned different techniques. I really like to observe human behavior. I've studied a lot about psychology and things like that, and so that's helped a great deal. But we go through the cycle of addiction and how to identify those triggers and how to stop it. But for me personally, the emotions really started coming up. When you start cleaning your body out, you clean up the emotions too. And that's where the energy healing came in. And it was so much more effective than any kind of talk therapy, because it just cleared it so quickly. So that was really helpful.
What about toxins in our food? We kind of talked about that a little bit, but do you believe that there is what's called a total body toxic load from all these herbicides, and then they start gaining in and storing in our body? Absolutely.
Our organs can store a lot of toxins, the liver especially, and that's where a lot of diseases come from. It's from the liver because it's over toxified. And so that's one of the first areas that we need to address to clean. There are 5 different channels of elimination. The first one is the bowel, and the second is the liver, and you also have the kidneys. The skin is also another, and the lungs. So these are different areas that we address with the food and the herbs together to be able to help with cleaning things out and detoxifying. And then, you know, you might have some symptoms that come up that may look like, you know, some sickness or things like that, but eventually you get to a point where you're quite clean, and so you don't get sick anymore, which is pretty awesome. I haven't been sick for almost 9 years.
That's congratulations.
And off of medication. I got off the medication for the thyroid, which is pretty much unheard of.
Especially with Graves' disease, and you've had surgery.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I talked to my endocrinologist, and she yelled at me. She said, "You can't use herbs. Don't even think that you can do that. You know, you've got to stick to this medication." And I fired her and got to work myself. I wouldn't suggest doing that to everyone. You know, you do need to be working with a doctor. But for me, I didn't have the cooperation of the doctor. And what I'm noticing now, though, almost 10 years later, is that doctors are starting to get it. Yeah. You know, they're understanding. And I've seen articles about chefs going in and training doctors about nutrition and other things, which is really impressive.
In my research, I've read that an average physician gets 16 hours of nutrition training, and even dietitians and nutritionists are not getting the right information because I don't know if that was from the pharmaceutical companies and how they influenced the education that was put in our conventional medicine training, but we're going to different experts. So what's your thoughts on nutritionists and dietitians that are getting trained, and they're the ones that are going out and teaching about diabetes. What's your take on that?
The thing that's difficult is I looked into those programs because I wanted to become a dietitian, and I was really frustrated by what they were teaching, just because they are backed by the agricultural department, and they have an agenda to sell the meat and the dairy and the grains, but the grains are not prepared properly. They're just the dry flour, and you need to be preparing your grains by sprouting them first and then creating a flour out of it and then making the bread. So that's a better way for our bodies to be able to assimilate the nutrients. Whereas, if you just have that dry flour, that actually has an opioid effect in the body. It's like a drug, which is why we can become addicted to those kind of carbs.
So interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Let's talk about gluten for just a second, just because flours came up into the conversation.
Sure.
What have they done to the flour and gluten? Why are so many people having allergies to it?
Well, the wheat has been hybridized over 40 different times. I'm sure it's more than that, but it's actually changed the chromosomes in the wheat so that our bodies can't recognize it anymore. There's einkorn wheat, which is one of the first types of wheat. It used to grow super high, and now they've got it hybridized to the point where it's really, really low, like about here. So there are a variety of reasons why they've done that. They have not figured out how to do the genetically modified yet, but it is still hybridized. So that affects our bodies because it changes the way that our body looks at it. It doesn't look at it as a food anymore. Plus, they often spray the seeds or the wheat that come out after they get it, after they harvest it. And so this causes further problems for us as well. I believe that a lot of people have intolerance to gluten because of how it's been treated. I have a really bad intolerance, and so I have to stay away from it. But I seem to do okay on the organic wheat that is more like the einkorn wheat. So the things that are closer to their natural state is really what we're looking for.
Well, we've heard of wheat bread, white bread, wheat bread, even sourdough bread, because sourdough bread has to go through some digestive enzyme process just to make it sour.
Right.
Can you compare those different types of wheat, just white to wheat to sourdough to sprouted? Sure. Are some of them better than the others?
So the white to wheat, or the wheat to white, actually, that's taking out the bran. That's taking out the bran of the wheat. And so the bran is actually where it's very close to the seed, and it's where you get the most nutrients from. And so once they strip that, then the nutrients are pretty much gone, and they have to fortify it, put back in nutrients. So the way they fortify cereals and bread and things like this is they add in, for example, iron. They'll put in little shavings of metal for iron, and that's considered fortified. So they end up putting chalk in instead of calcium. So these are things that you need to be careful of and be aware of. We are designed for plants. The plants have roots that go down into the ground, very far down. For example, we have alfalfa. Alfalfa goes about 45 feet down into the ground, and it's a nutritive, so it's one of those that has a ton of nutrition in it. And it pulls that nutrition from the rocks, and then through photosynthesis, then it's able to change it into a form that we can digest and assimilate in the body. Whereas rocks, we can't lick them, we can't assimilate them, we can't eat them.
What specifically have you had to change in your own diet?
I've had to take out pretty much everything but the uncooked fruits, vegetables, and then nuts and seeds, which I do sprout. I also have seaweed every once in a while. I live here in Utah, so there are some things that I do, like I have root vegetables in the wintertime. Sometimes I'll have wild rice or beans, but mostly plant-based things. Anything that's cooked, I usually make sure that I have something raw with it, like fruit beforehand or a big salad, so that I can get those enzymes working for me so that it can help digest it.
I read a book. It was called Digestive Enzymes. I can't remember the author. Oh, you've read the book.
We talked about that. Yeah, we read it.
So is my understanding what that book says, and I wanted to see if your philosophy was aligned with his philosophy, was that lactose enzyme that helps break down, that's the enzyme that actually helps break down our milk. By the time we reach the age 2, those enzymes, those lactose enzymes, we don't have as many. So therefore, we shouldn't actually be eating dairy, and dairy can become an inflammatory food that creates mucus for our bodies after the age of 2. So what's your thoughts on dairy?
I don't eat or drink dairy. I used to be a heavy milk drinker, and I had horrible green phlegm coming up every morning and coughing like crazy. And when I got rid of that, that went away. It is very mucus forming, and as anything coming from an animal, I say if it has a face, then don't eat it. But it's inflammatory, and it does produce mucus. And that's where a lot of the neck and back pain came for me. When I got rid of it, that went away. So if you have a lot of inflammation, the first thing I say is get rid of animal products, and then it goes away pretty quickly.
Okay. Besides eliminating, do you believe in eliminating all of gluten or all of grains? I think I want to kind of go back just a little bit.
Okay, so it depends on the person. There are some people that can handle grains, but I definitely recommend doing organic and like the einkorn or kamut, something like that we talked about. Grain is, in the scriptures, it talks about it being the staff of life, right?
Yes.
So what does staff mean? What is a staff?
I don't know what you're trying to
say
there.
It's like a something that holds you up, right?
Assists you, helps you.
Do we all go walking around with a staff?
No. We
don't, do we? So it's something that will help us, and if you don't mind me getting a little scriptural on you here, it talks about, in the Old Testament, about Joseph and how he stored up grain for 7 years, right? And then during the 7 years of famine, that's what they ate. So it's really good for famine. It's really good for maybe winter or other times of the year. But for us to eat bread and cereal every single morning, that's not very good for us.
But that was the food pyramid.
I mean,
the food pyramid was eat your grains. It was the very bottom of our food pyramid.
And why do you think that is? Who created that? Do you know?
Well, it was the food, in my opinion, it was the food industry, because they wanted to promote their foods.
Yeah,
and it had a longer shelf life.
Correct. Yep. So that has, I'm not advocating not ever having it. I need people to understand that, because there are people that are like, well, if she believes that, then I'm not going to eat that way. And that's not the case. I do have bread every once in a while. It's the sprouted wheat bread that's organic, and my stomach seems to do fine on that. If you are celiac, then obviously you need to stay away from that. But I don't have it all the time. It's maybe every once in a while, like once or twice a month, something like that. But I do notice a difference too when I'm not eating it as opposed to when I do. My stomach, if I eat too much of it, I can start feeling bloated. It gets like I'm 9 months pregnant, really. It's crazy. And the same thing happens with corn because of the genetic modification of it. So
I know specifically for me, and I cheat occasionally too, but I'll get Achilles tendonitis or plantar fasciitis, and even sometimes I'm susceptible to autoimmune that breaks out in hives, and I'll break out with. It just happened the other day. My sister we had a wedding, and for the wedding they had a prosciutto bar, and so I tasted it, and then I was completely inflamed. My ankles were inflamed because I wanted to try her 5 different types of prosciutto.
You pay for it, don't you?
Yeah, and I paid for it. I pay for it every time that I do. And you think, and I think, okay, mentally, and that's why I want to go, because I was like, how does this emotionally affect you? Because mentally, I sometimes feel like I'm being left out of the crowd.
Right.
And you are, going raw food, a lot of times you feel left out of society.
Yeah.
And how do you personally handle that?
That was a huge struggle for me. It took me several years to get over. In fact, it's only been recently where I'm completely over it. So it's like 8 or 9 years is what it took. But I had to coach myself, and just every time, like for a little while there, I wouldn't go and attend any activities with family or things like that. And I just isolated myself. And after a while, I was just like, this is ridiculous. I need to have a life, So I started coaching myself and just, okay, before I go, I'm going to start taking something with me that I can eat, and take a little bit extra so that I can share it with people. And they started asking questions, and sometimes they'd look at my food and they're like, ew, what is it that you're eating, and that, it kind of hurt my feelings, but I had to learn to be tough. And what I ultimately came to the understanding of is that I have this body, this is mine, and I have to take care of it, and nobody else is responsible for me. So I don't care what other people think about how I eat and how I treat my body, because I love myself, and it doesn't matter what they say or think. And when I got to that point, it finally was like, I can do this.
Well, I think that for what I'm hearing you say is you cared about how you felt and how you could deliver and even be friends. And that was important of you taking care of your own health.
Absolutely.
For you to serve. And
the funny thing about it is that the more that I kept to what I was supposed to be doing, family members and friends would say things like, you're so strong, and it's amazing that you're able to eat this way. And then they started to do it. They'd come to me and ask questions about whatever issues their family was dealing with. And I'd share my recipes and just help them along. And they're doing much better too. So it's good.
Now, you have a hair analysis test that you do. Okay, let's learn more about that.
Okay, so this is a little machine. It's from the Cell Wellbeing Company. And it actually, you can put a couple of pieces of hair on it. It has little coils here. And what it's doing is it's testing the frequency of the hair. So there are different frequencies for like parasites, for example, or viruses, or different nutrients within the body. And so it will pick up these different frequencies from the hair, and you've got about 3 minutes to put it onto the little machine before the hair follicle dies. And then it gets sent over to Germany to their computers, and it analyzes it over 800 different biomarkers against those. And then in about 20 minutes, you get a 34-page report back, and it tells you the nutrients that you're deficient in. It tells you about like the frequencies. It picks up anything from microwaves to television, computers, those kinds of things, as well as environmental factors. So like we said, the parasites, mold, fungus, spores, all those things. Even radiation, toxic metals, things like that.
How much does this cost test? Or how much does this cost?
So it retails, well, the machine is rather expensive. And if you're interested in finding out more, then I do sell them, so contact me. But for the analysis itself, it retails at $300, and I like to give it at half off at $150. And that actually comes with a 45-minute consultation over the phone with me, and we go over your report and talk about it, and then I give you some ideas of how to help. But it's based on food, so you do get a food plan with it as well, which is great.
So if it shows deficiencies, does that mean that I go buy a supplement, or do I try to fix that with my food that I'm eating?
No, you have a whole food plan that it will give you. So it's whatever nutrients you're missing or environmental factors, it has foods that will help to clean those out or to help nourish your body with them.
What's the accuracy of the hair?
It's pretty accurate. I don't know that they can come up with an exact number because it's different for each person, but just to give you an idea, I did have a client who got this done, and then she had just gotten her blood done, and she compared the two, and they were exactly the same. So I was pretty impressed by that.
When you're saying blood, do you happen to know if that was like an IgE test or an IgG?
I don't.
Do you happen to know?
No.
Because I do know that there's a bunch of different tests that's called IgE, and it will look at 93 different foods, or up to 1,000 different foods, and it will on some of them, it will scale at 1, 2, or 3, depending on how inflammatory it is. From my research, I have seen that, well, the gut changes every 38 days. The microvilli changes, and so if I eat a raw, healthy, colorful diet,
Right.
that I can change that little microbiome and those microvilli and the gut lining
Right.
in my gut. Do you, in your research, maybe I should have you define that. What is leaky gut?
Well, leaky gut is where they're saying that you have holes and things in the gut. And often that will happen because of grains and things that you're eating. Grains are really hard on the gut. They're difficult when you're eating them all the time. They actually scratch the lining of the gut. And then there are other factors as well. But the gut lining, it will, if you're giving it some good probiotics from fermented foods, and I like to go more toward the food than the supplementation because it can be very expensive to supplement.
Yeah.
And a lot of those aren't very effective either. And some of them are grown on milk, you know. So, for example, you can eat grapes or kale and they have that white film on them. That's actually natural probiotics. You can also get probiotics from fermented foods, but that's more toward like a dying off food. So I tend to go toward the living food. Does that make sense? But that will go into your small intestines and it will actually make B12. A lot of people think that if you're vegan or vegetarian that you can't produce B12, but that's not correct. If you do get that natural probiotic, your body will naturally make it.
Where did genetics come into play? Because I know now a lot of people are getting their 23andMe or their Ancestry.com or where there's nutrigenomics testing out there, and most people are coming back and they're saying that I think it's now like 80% is becoming methylating deficient. They're not able to methylate the B12 and they would need to be on some type of methyl B12. How much study have you done with genetics?
Well, this test actually, or the scan, is based off of epigenetics. And this is a new science that's telling us that about 98% of our issues health-wise are due to the environment. And only about 2% have to do with our genes. But our genes can be turned on or off depending on what we're doing with the environment. So if you're eating really healthy, then that reduces your risk of a lot of different diseases.
Wow. Who's been your mentor with this?
I've actually had to pioneer this a lot myself. I did take a few courses. Like there was a lady from England, Karen Noller, who I took a raw food course from and became a certified coach through her. So she was a good mentor for me. But a lot of reading in books and really using myself as a guinea pig on this, you know, and that's not really the greatest way of saying things for a vegan, but you know, testing it on myself is really where I've wanted to make sure that it works for me, and then helping with family and friends and others, and just seeing that these results are universal, which has been phenomenal.
I want to talk about eggs.
Okay.
And nuts and seeds.
Okay.
What's your opinion on eggs?
I don't eat them.
Okay.
I don't suggest to eat them. There are a lot of people, and eggs are like butter versus, margarine. You know, they go back and forth constantly with science. And I think a lot of it has to do with it, they need to sell it or not. You know? So we kind of wipe all that stuff out and we start looking at the research. There's Dr. Greg, I can't remember his last name, but he wrote the book, How Not to Die.
Drugger.
Yes.
Is his last name.
Yes. So How Not to Die, he talks about the 15 different, the top 15 diseases in America. And he talks about eggs and that they are linked to breast cancer and other cancers. And I've also heard from a variety of different books and resources that eggs are just not a good thing for us. They are also mucus forming. So.
But what about the white versus the yolk? Because there's lots of, you can have the white, but you can't have the yolk.
I know.
What's your thoughts on?
I just stay away from it.
Completely.
Yep, and I haven't missed it.
How do you bind your food? Because egg is a binder. It keeps the food bind it together. What's your substitute?
Use flax seeds. So you can mill those and add water to them. A good little recipe for you is 1 tablespoon of flaxseed meal and 2 tablespoons of water. That creates 1 egg. So in any recipe, you can do that instead of an egg.
Okay. Now, what about nuts and seeds? I was like, I asked you something, I couldn't remember.
The nuts and seeds I sprout also. They don't necessarily grow a little sprout, but you want to soak them so that you can get the phytonutrients off, or the phytic acid. So that is going to make it so that we can better digest it. And then it turns sweet instead of bitter. It's just like a storage packet on there that we need to rinse off.
Did you personally make your own milk? Because do you use a lot of nut milks?
I don't actually.
Okay.
I eat pretty simply. I just, nature has its own packets. So the banana, I get organic bananas and eat 5 or 6 of those in a sitting. I eat a high amount of fruit and then keep the fat very low to about 10% or less. And then I eat as much of the vegetables and greens as I can. And you'll notice that you can't eat a lot of vegetables. A lot of these diets are very vegetable heavy and really leave the fruit out. And that's a big mistake, because the fruit is the healer. The fruit is where you get protection from all kinds of diseases. It's also antiviral, antifungal, antibacterial. I mean, it's a powerhouse of nutrition and protection for your body. So we need to have a high amount of it. And if you eat more fruit, your sugar cravings will disappear. They really will, because your body is telling you, I need more fruit. But we always go to the fruit flavored sugar snacks, right?
Yeah.
And that's not what we need.
Okay, you just said something really interesting, because if somebody else was sitting here, they would counteract you with that 10% fat.
Sure.
Because there is a lot of people out there in the market space that are pumping that you need to eat a high-fat diet.
I know.
Dr. Udo is one of them, and he's saying, hey, the more oils that you can eat, the better. A higher fat diet, you still need the vegetables. Yeah. It's the carbohydrates that, what's your research been done on a high-fat diet?
I've done quite a bit of research on the keto diet and other diets that are out there. And I know these are coming from cardiologists and other doctors who are touting this. And people are getting some good results with it. I don't like, talking badly about anyone or anything. But for me and the research that I've done and the plant-based way of eating, it's just hands down so much better. The problem that you get with high fat is that it clogs up the arteries, and it causes any kind of sugars, like from fruit, to slow down in the bloodstream. And that spikes the sugars, and then it feeds candida and all kinds of things. So that's why this type of a diet is not very fruit friendly. But the problem too is that it's very hard on the liver. It's hard on all the organs. It really taxes them to have to work harder. And over time, you're going to end up having other illnesses as well as dying. And that's one of the risks. And people often will keel over from heart attack, from things like this. So you have to be super careful. It's great to lose weight, but if you're going to be eating plants, you're going to do that anyway, naturally. It just gets you down to your body size.
Did you have to make any sleep or change your relationships with people? Did you have to change your inner circle of people that were you surrounded yourself with?
Not really. No, I think the key to that is to not be evangelical about this.
Okay.
Because when I started at first, I had such great results. I wanted everybody to know about it. But I found that they just didn't care, or they felt like, I remember my sister just recently saying at a reunion, she said, you're so much calmer about things than you were before. And I was just talking about food all the time, and how it could help people and stuff. And I've learned that I really have to just be around people and get to know them and love them for who they are and where they're at. There's no judgment whatsoever. I'm not the food police, But I want them to know that I love them for who they are and that I'm here as a resource for them, but I don't start that conversation. I wait until they ask.
Now, you've been into energy work. If you've gotten into some type of energy work, why did you get into the energy side of things? Why did you start investigating there?
Because it helped me so much. I wanted to be able to further offer that to my clients. So,
and that was for stress? Was that specifically for stress?
It was for the emotions that were coming up. We all have, from trauma and from abuses that go on, even from just daily stressors of life. We have things that we carry in the different organs of our bodies. We learn from epigenetics that our bodies are all energy, right? So when you have this, you're being bombarded by negative energy from the media and from people and everything else, and even from low vibration foods that you're putting into your body, it puts a lot of stressors on you, and you need to be able to clear that out. So using energy to be able to clear it, it's changing the mindset, and it's literally changing the energy and making it positive.
So what specific type of energy work were you trained in? Was it a Reiki? Was it meditation? No. Was it what
I'm
type
super
of energy?
Picky about what I allow into my space, and so I've done research on this too, and I've actually had different sessions by different people, and I can feel their energy, and I can feel whether it's a good energy or not. And whatever modality people choose to use, that's great. For me, I just wanted something that I could resonate with and that increased my energy. So I've worked with Bill Barney and with Jennifer Daly, and those are two. Jennifer helped me to understand the very basics of it, and she just kind of outlined everything with the auras and the chakras and the meridians and all these things. And then Bill has added on to that, but they both do kind of a variety of different things. It's based off of the emotion code and a variety of different things. So,
what's the importance of sleep for health? Have you done any research on sleep? It's
important. That's where we regenerate and repair and heal. So we do need to have sleep. And I've always been a big sleeper. Not necessarily by choice, but because I went through chronic fatigue for 28 years, I was always sleeping and never really feeling refreshed. So it was a huge change when I started eating healthy. And I remember that second day, I woke up with energy at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I was like, what is going on? Because I usually would get up around 8 or so and help my kids get off to school, and then I'd crash again. But I had energy, and it sustained itself through the entire day. I was just floored. And
did you ever test like your cortisol levels, and did any physician kind of help you understand adrenal insufficiency? Because really that's what chronic fatigue is. Was that research you had to do on your own, or did a physician or a nurse practitioner, anyone guide you in that?
They helped a little bit, but they always wanted to go back to the drugs, and I just wasn't willing to do that. So again, I had to go out onto my own, and that's where the study of herbology really helped me a lot. I studied with the School of Natural Healing, and they went over a lot of this as well. And Dr. Christopher has great formulas. I really like them for a variety of things. He has an adrenal formula that works really well. The great thing about herbs too is that they're in their whole form. So we're able to use those like food, and they're actually food and nourishment for the different areas of the body. They also cleanse and strengthen those areas. So in conjunction with eating the plant foods, the herbs are really beneficial too.
And they make your food taste yummier.
They do. Some of them.
Well, I found that they make my food taste yummier when a proper chef knows how to cook with the herbs.
Yeah. It amazes me how your taste buds change too. Because mine were just dead. I was eating sugar and gluten and processed foods and fried foods and all these different things. And my taste buds, I couldn't taste much. I had to salt things a lot. But when I started cleaning things out, the taste buds really opened up. And did you know parsley has a flavor? Did you know that zucchini has a flavor? It's amazing. So I don't do a lot of dressings on my salads either. I just put fresh herbs on there because they just burst with flavor. It's amazing.
Yeah, I think the first time that I had fresh dill, I had grown my own dill and I had put it on. I was like, well, this is even a lot better than just the dill that you can buy in the containers. The fresh dill had a different, the taste was a lot different, energetic. That's how I would describe it the first time I had dill.
Yeah. I love it. I just go in my herb garden and pick things out and eat them. I love them.
Did you have to learn how to garden?
Yeah.
Or was that something you were already doing?
No, my husband's the avid gardener in our family. He grows amazing gardens every year. And so he gardens and harvests, and I help out with the things. He also does that too. He cans pickles and things like that. But we've been playing around with the preservation. Canning is a heat-intensive thing, so he's been doing cold-packed pickles. So he just puts them in the refrigerator now, and they're turning out really well.
Oh, I know that a lot of people are buying those dry, where you can actually dry your food, and then it's supposed to, from my understanding, it's supposed to save the nutritional value and add water, and there you have your meal.
Yeah.
I have a sister that raves about them. I've not dug into that, but she.
Do you mean the freeze dryers?
Yeah.
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 Those are good.
Have you worked with them at all?
I have. People often ask me about my preferences for like the preservation. So fresh is always best, right?
Yeah.
And then fermented is the second best because it's still alive, but it's adding those probiotics or it actually makes probiotics out of the brine that you put in there. And that will last for a year or so. So that's a really good way to do it. And then the third one would be freeze drying because it just takes all of the moisture out, but it preserves it really well. Okay. And then you just add the water back in to hydrate it. The fourth one would be dehydrating. That doesn't last nearly as long as freeze drying. I think freeze drying has around 25 to 30 year life shelf life. Dehydration is maybe 3 to 5 years. And then the last one would be canning. That would be like the last resort.
Now, as a kid, I was raised, I remember going down into my grandma's canning, and she had a whole process, a whole storage facility just of canned. And my mother as well when I was young, and then it ended up being box food and processed food just because of convenience. Mm-hmm. And I feel like in today's society, we don't even know how to can our food. We don't even know how to preserve our food.
Right. We don't even cook food. We go to other people and ask them to do it.
Yeah. Does there need to be a shift back to that?
Absolutely. That's one of the things that I teach, and people come to me all the time and they say, can you make my meals? And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that for you, but I will teach you how to do it. And I really want people to get back into doing that. It's not only the healthiest way of eating, but it also nourishes your relationships, getting the children in there and enjoying time together. If you're too busy to do that, you need to clear your schedule a little bit.
But that's the biggest thing why people are not cooking is because of time management.
I know.
How did you have to adjust your time management?
I had to start saying no.
Because this
really
was
hard.
Important.
Absolutely.
Because this was important. And this other thing over here was not as urgent as I was trying to make it be.
Yeah. Well, we have the ability to schedule. And I realized, I can work from 9 to 9 or however, as an entrepreneur, I could work forever. Trust me.
Yeah.
But I've really had to box out or block out time in the morning, and then I'm done when my kids come home from school. I may do a few things here and there once they go and play with friends, but there are certain times during the day. Mealtime is one of those. I'm done at 5 so that I can prepare a meal by 6 and have my family eat healthier, and myself included. And then in the mornings, I block that out until 10 because I have my routine that I do. And I think people need to do that. We need to take better care of ourselves because, again, who else is going to do it?
Now, you have a couple different programs. You have a 1-day program, you have a 7-day raw, and then a 6-week course that you put people through.
I do.
Why would somebody choose one over the other?
Well, I've kind of been phasing out the other two a little bit because they're not as effective as the 6-week course. It actually extends over to about 24 weeks.
Oh.
We've gone into the 24 weeks because I find that with clients who do a shorter amount of time, it's just not as effective. But when they're going and they're supported for 24 weeks, it's like, okay, they can make a life change in that time. And if you can give me a year, you're golden. You know?
How do you support them? Is that once a week that they get on a phone call? Is that a personal session? What's provided?
So we do several, like 4 different personal coaching sessions with me. You also get a couple of energy clearing sessions, which are really helpful.
Wow.
You get my recipe book, so I have a couple of recipe books
Oh.
here. The Reasonably Raw is like the bridge to bridge the gap between the standard American diet and the raw food. And then this one, the Beautifully Raw, is all raw food. So with the 2, you get over 200 recipes. And then this is actually my course here, just the group program.
Okay.
So this is what we go over. You get a workbook that you print out, and then you have modules, video modules that you go through every week, and then we get together twice a week, or every other week, sorry. So bi-weekly is when we get together as a group, and we discuss it, we learn from each other, ask questions. It's a great program, and the people who've gone through this have made life-changing experiences or transformations.
Do you put a maximum on the number of people you allow into that course?
I do. Mm-hmm. I get about a group of about 10 to 15 is sufficient.
Very cool. And how do people find you? You have a website. What's your website?
It's at rawchefwendy.com. So, and you can contact me through there. I've got a little contact form as well. So if you want to email me and let me know what you're looking for, then we can put you in where you need to be.
And are you trying to stay Utah-based, or are you trying to go national? Where would you like this to go?
This is great nationally. I want to help as many people as I possibly can. There's so many people out there that are sick, and it hurts me to see them in pain. I really don't like that. And I know that there's a better way that people can get healthy again and they don't have to suffer. And so as many people as I can help, I'm so happy to do it.
Have recently, there's this rise of functional medicine practitioners that are trying to learn about nutrition and how food is medicine and food is information for your bodies, and they're trying to actually connect the pieces. Have you interacted with the functional medicine community or
Absolutely.
physicians?
Yeah. In fact, I work over at a chiropractic office. We've integrated what I do with him, and we're in Draper with Dr. McIntyre. He's an excellent chiropractor, and he's got a couple of massage therapists in there, as well as myself. And then, let's see, I'm teaming up with Carson Delgado, who is a nurse practitioner, and she's wonderful. I am helping her, and she's helping me. We're doing some podcasts and videos together and things, and we really see eye to eye on this and want to educate people.
Yeah, we have actually one podcast with Carson Delgado, so make sure that you actually check that podcast out.
Amazing.
She is amazing, absolutely amazing. Recently, there also has been a rise of understanding for CBD and how it affects inflammation.
Right.
And if we can eliminate inflammatory foods from our diets, but what's your thoughts on CBD for inflammatory?
You know, when I first started my journey, I was using hemp oil. You know, I found that was a really great thing. And I actually suggested that my clients use the hemp oil. Hemp oil is a little bit different than CBD oil from what I understand, but it was very effective. And I think what people need to understand and be educated about is that this isn't marijuana. It's the cousin to marijuana, and it doesn't have the high levels of THC in it. It's very minute amounts. But I think that it's very beneficial. I do think, however, that essential oils, herbs, anything like these can be used the same way that they use medication, where you just cover up the symptoms instead of dealing with the core issues. So what I teach people to do is to use nutrition and build that foundation so that you can get the strength and the energy and the nourishment that you need. And once you've got that in place, then use those kind of as a crutch to help you get where you need to be, but you're not going to need to be on it all the time.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
We appreciate your time, and thank you. And you can find Wendy Rasha at www.rashchefwendy, is that what it is? .com.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you for watching the Legends Health, Wellness, and Performance podcast with